My name is Sarah Gross. I'm 32, and for the past 12 years, I've lived most of my working life under a thin layer of plaster dust and the faint scent of old timber. I restore historic buildings, mansions, churches, forgotten estates that need someone willing to listen to the groans and murmurs of 100 years. It's slow work, painstaking work, honest work, and most days it feels like the only thing in my life that doesn't pretend to be something it's not. My boyfriend Nathan was the opposite of everything old houses taught me. He was glossy, polished, impatient with anything that didn't shine immediately. 29, an interior designer still clawing his way up the ladder, but already dressing like he owned it. Leased BMW, designer shoes, a carefully curated life held together by aesthetics and credit. We'd been together for 14 months, long enough for me to memorize the exact tone he used when he pretended not to judge me, long enough for me to understand he liked being seen with me, but not necessarily seen for who I was. Looking back, the signs were loud. The way he'd tell me I should upgrade my truck, the hints about how I might dress with more intention, the constant suggestions that he should do the talking when we met his work contacts. He'd mention image and perception like they were the building blocks of human worth. I'd smile and let it pass. Old houses had taught me patience, after all. Everything shifted the day he burst into my living room, buzzing with excitement the way a child buzzes before opening gifts. "Sarah, you won't believe this," he said, pacing. "I have been invited to the Ashford Charity Gala. Victoria Ashford herself sent the invitation." He said her name like it belonged to royalty. "She's huge, Sarah. Old money, a gatekeeper. If she likes my work, she could open doors I've been trying to crack for years." Then he paused, almost theatrically. "She said I could bring a guest, and I want you to come." It sounded less like an invitation and more like a calculated risk. "Of course," I said. He hesitated, studying my clothes as though gauging the cost of my presence. "It's extremely formal," he warned. "Black tie. These people summer in the Hamptons. They're different. I just don't want you to feel out of place." I kept my face still. Inside, something old and tired shifted. "I'll be fine," I said. He smiled, relieved, as if he'd narrowly escaped a crisis. Then came 3 weeks of gentle, relentless guidance. "You should get a haircut before the gala. Maybe rent a more sophisticated dress. And please, just let me handle the networking. People like this are sensitive." I nearly laughed at that. People like this were my clients. Their staircases were the ones I repaired. Their hand-carved banisters were the ones I rescued from termites. But Nathan didn't know. He never asked. He didn't care enough to wonder. I had been restoring the Ashford estate for 8 months. Nathan had no idea. The day of the gala, he arrived at my house looking like an award season nominee. When I opened the door in my black gown, he blinked in open surprise before recovering with a strained compliment. "You look great," he said, as if it hadn't occurred to him I might. The drive to the estate was filled with nervous monologues about who we needed to impress and how I should follow his lead. Then, casually, too casually, he said the sentence that dropped like a stone inside my chest. "Just try not to embarrass me tonight, okay? These people are way above your level." I turned toward the window so he wouldn't see my expression. Outside, manicured estates rolled past, properties whose bones I knew intimately. I thought of the ballroom I'd patched by hand, the marble I'd matched stone by stone, the timber frame I'd coaxed back to life. He had no idea who he was talking to. We pulled into the Ashford driveway. The mansion rose, grand and glowing, against the darkening sky. Nathan slowed, whispering, "My God, look at this place." I looked, but not with awe, with recognition. The valet opened my door. He smiled politely. "Good evening, Ms. Gross. Nice seeing you again." Nathan's head snapped toward me, confusion flashing across his face. "He's probably just being polite," I said softly. Inside, he walked with the reverence of someone stepping into a cathedral for the first time. The marble beneath his feet was marble I'd painstakingly restored over 6 long weeks. The gold leaf on the molding caught light in a way I'd fought to preserve. He didn't notice the quiet smile tugging at my lips. Then I saw her, Victoria Ashford, moving through the crowd like someone who owned every square inch of the air around her. She saw me. Her eyes brightened. She lifted a hand in greeting. Nathan straightened, rehearsing his introduction in his head. Victoria didn't look at him. She came directly, unmistakably, to me. And right then, right in that moment, the first crack split through the night. Victoria reached me with both hands extended, warmth written all over her face. Sarah, finally. I've been telling everyone you'd be here tonight. They've been dying to meet the woman who resurrected my ballroom. Nathan froze beside me, his practiced smile collapsing mid-pose. He tried to step forward, but Victoria barely acknowledged his existence. "It's good to see you," I said, letting her take my hands. Her grip was firm, familiar, grounding. "Good? It's wonderful," she corrected. "Now, come. There are at least 6 people who want to thank you personally for saving their family events from taking place in a crumbling shell of plaster." Her tone was playful, affectionate. She sounded like someone proud of me. Nathan blinked, glanced at me, then at her, confusion twisting into something sharp. "You two know each other?" he finally asked. Victoria turned to him, polite but distracted. "Oh, yes, of course. Sarah is my restoration specialist. The brilliant one." The brilliant one. Nathan's throat bobbed. "We've been working together for months," she continued. "Did Sarah not tell you she practically lives here?" I opened my mouth to soften the blow, but Nathan beat me to it with a brittle laugh. She mentioned working on a house." Victoria raised a brow. "A house? My estate is hardly just a house, dear." And just like that, the room heard it. Everyone within earshot glanced our way. Nathan's embarrassment vibrated off him like static. Victoria slipped her arm through mine. "Come, Sarah. You must let me introduce you." The crowd parted around us as she guided me forward. Nathan trailed behind, trying to catch up to a conversation that had already left him behind. Within minutes, I was surrounded by faces I knew only from planning meetings and donor events: architects, board members, preservationists, people who understood the language of timber joints and lime plaster, people who appreciated the work because they'd watched me do it. "This is the woman who preserved the original cornices," Victoria announced proudly. "She's the one who stabilized the south facade, the woman who matched the marble vein patterns by hand." Compliments circled around me like a tide. I accepted them quietly, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and humility that good craftsmanship always stirred. Nathan stood a few steps away, smiling stiffly whenever someone acknowledged him, shoulders sinking every time they returned their attention to me. He had imagined himself the star of the evening. He'd arrived expecting to shine, and instead, he was standing in the shadow of someone he believed to be beneath him. At one point, he tried to reinsert himself. "So, Sarah, tell them about your construction work," he said loudly, like he was throwing me a life preserver. Someone laughed. "Construction? She's a preservation specialist, isn't she?" I answered calmly. "Restoration work is different. My job is to protect what can't be replaced." Victoria beamed. "Exactly, and she does it better than anyone I've ever hired." Nathan's smile twitched. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. Nathan snatched 2 glasses without looking at him, already frustrated. I noticed the waiter's expression, a brief flicker of discomfort. I'd seen that look before. Nathan often treated service workers like they were furniture, invisible, replaceable. It hit me then, how many things I'd ignored. Victoria tugged my arm gently. "I need your opinion on something." She lowered her voice. "It's about the carriage house windows. Come to my study?" I followed her through a side corridor. The air quieted immediately, muffling the noise of the gala behind thick restored walls. Inside the study, she closed the door and turned to me with a knowing look. "So that's your boyfriend," she said carefully. I exhaled. "Yes." He seemed surprised. "That's one way to put it." She smiled sympathetically. "Some people build their world on appearances. You build yours on integrity. Not everyone knows how to appreciate that." She pulled a folder from her desk. "Before we get to the window specs, I want to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. $15,000. A bonus for completing the ballroom ahead of schedule. "Victoria, this is too much." "It isn't enough," she said, shutting the folder. "You saved a century of history. You honor the work of craftsmen long dead. You treat this place like it matters. That's worth more than numbers on paper." The praise settled in my chest like a warm weight. We talked for 20 minutes about window mullions, ventilation, and historically accurate materials. It was the kind of conversation that made me feel seen, not as someone to decorate a room, but as someone who built the bones of it. When we returned to the ballroom, I spotted Nathan near the dessert table. He was half listening to an older woman who was explaining her lifelong obsession with flower arranging. His smile was strained, his posture stiff, his eyes darting across the room looking for me. The moment he saw me, relief washed over his face. He excused himself abruptly and strode toward me. "Can we talk?" he said tightly, fingers already curling around my arm. He led me through those open doors and onto the veranda. Cool night air swept across the back of my neck. Are you having fun? I asked softly. His expression snapped. You made me look ridiculous in there. I stared at him. I made you look ridiculous? You didn't tell me. You let me walk in there thinking you were— He cut himself off, jaw locking. You let me make a fool of myself. I didn't let you do anything, I said. I told you months ago I was working on a historic estate. You didn't ask which one. You never cared to know. That's not fair. Isn't it? His voice rose. You hid this from me, Sarah. You hid who you were. I felt something inside me go very still. No, I didn't hide who I was. You just never bothered to look. For a moment, he had no words. Behind us, the string quartet played something soft and aching. Inside, laughter echoed in the ballroom I had rebuilt with my own 2 hands. Nathan swallowed hard, anger flaring again. This is not the time or place for this conversation. You're right, I said, turning toward the door. Let's go say goodbye. He followed, silent and seething. Inside, Victoria thanked me warmly for coming, even reminding me about our meeting next week. Nathan muttered something polite, face pale with humiliation. The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that settles into your bones and tells you exactly how something is going to end. And when we reached my house, Nathan finally whispered, I think I should stay at my place tonight. I think you should, I said. He hesitated, searching my face for something. An apology, a rescue, a reassurance I didn't owe him. You humiliated me, he said quietly. No, I replied. You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering it for you. He didn't answer. He stepped out of the car and drove away. I stood in my doorway for a long moment before going inside. My dog, Penny, lifted her head from her bed and thumped her tail gently. She didn't care about suits or chandeliers or social circles. She cared that I came home, that I was safe. I sat beside her on the floor, resting a hand on her warm fur. The night felt quieter than usual, not peaceful, just honest. And deep in that honesty, something old finally cracked open. Nathan didn't call the next day, or the next, or the one after that. By the 4th day, I had almost gotten used to the silence, almost convinced myself that the quiet felt like relief rather than the aftershock of something breaking. Then my phone buzzed with a long message from him. Too long. The kind of message written by someone who still believed the problem was external, not internal. He apologized for overreacting, but mostly he talked about how humiliating the gala had been for him, how blindsided he felt, how I hadn't communicated, how I hadn't told him everything about my work, how he felt betrayed that his girlfriend could have been so much more impressive than he thought and he didn't know. It was almost breathtaking, the way he took his own condescension, flipped it on its back, and tried to lay it at my feet. I stared at the message for a long time, long enough for my dog, Penny, to come nudge my hand with her nose, sensing the tension in my shoulders, long enough for disbelief to soften into something steadier, calmer. Clarity. I called Kara. She had been my closest friend since high school, the kind who could read my silence better than most people's words. What happened? She asked immediately. I told her everything. The gala, Victoria, the introductions, Nathan's face twisting with shock, the argument on the veranda, the message I'd just read. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Kara said, Sarah, he's mad that you're better than he thought you were. I let out a dry breath of laughter. That's what it feels like. He thought he was dating someone below him, she said, and he loved it. It made him feel big, and now he knows he wasn't. That's what this is about. The truth of it was a clean, sharp blade. You need to end it, she said gently. I knew she was right. Ending something because it's toxic is easier than ending something because you've simply outgrown the person you were with. And with Nathan, I had outgrown the version of myself that made excuses for him. I texted him, we should talk in person tomorrow at my place. He replied almost instantly, agreed. He arrived the next evening looking tense, stiff, like he was about to walk into a performance he hadn't rehearsed well enough. He declined a drink, sat on the edge of my couch, and held himself like someone bracing for impact. Have you thought about what I said? He asked. I have, I said. He looked relieved, too relieved, as if he believed the story would fold back into the shape he wanted. I agree, I continued. We do need to talk about trust and communication. His shoulders loosened. I'm glad, because the way things happened. Trust works both ways, Nathan, I interrupted softly. So does communication. He blinked. Meaning? Meaning he had made assumptions. Heavy, suffocating assumptions, and built our entire relationship around them. You never asked about my work, I said. Not really. You never listened long enough to understand what I actually do, You treated me like a construction worker you had to explain to people. You told me not to embarrass you. You decided who I was before you ever bothered to learn it." His eyes flashed. "I didn't decide anything. You just never explained that you were—" "I did," I said quietly. "6 months ago. You were scrolling through your phone and said, 'That's nice, babe,' then started talking about a light fixture." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You made fun of my truck," I continued. "You corrected the clothes I wore. You wanted me to follow your lead in rooms filled with people you assumed were above me. But Nathan, they weren't above me. They just weren't impressed by the same things you were." He stood abruptly. "I'm not going to sit here and be attacked." "I'm not attacking you. You're rewriting everything just to make me the bad guy." "I'm telling you the truth," I said. "And the truth is, we don't work. Not because you're a bad person, but because the version of me you wanted isn't real, and the version of you I kept hoping would grow doesn't exist." His jaw tightened. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" "No," I whispered. "I'm accepting what's already broken." For a moment he looked at me, really looked, and I saw grief there, mixed with pride, tangled with disbelief. Then, slowly, coldness replaced it all. "Fine," he said. "If that's how you feel, then we're done." He grabbed his keys, paused at the door. "Good luck finding someone who actually appreciates your projects." "Restoration," I corrected gently. He scoffed and walked out, slamming the door hard enough that Penny jumped. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the house breathe around me, feeling the quiet settle like dust after demolition. Then I sat on the floor beside Penny, leaning into her warm body as she pressed her head against my arm. She didn't need explanations. She didn't need me to perform. She simply existed with me. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was honest. And honesty was a foundation I knew how to build on. Word travels strangely in the circles Nathan loves so much. It moves quickly, but never directly. It seeps, it whispers, it mutates. Within a week, people we both knew were messaging me with carefully polite variations of, "I heard something happened at the gala. Are you okay?" "I didn't realize you kept secrets from Nathan." Nathan seemed really hurt. What exactly happened? It didn't take long to figure out the shape of the story he was telling. Apparently, I had embarrassed him on purpose. I had withheld information. I had played him by not revealing that I was restoring the Ashford estate. The narrative was almost admirable in its commitment to delusion. Kara shut it down whenever she heard it. She had a talent for slicing through nonsense without raising her voice. But I learned something from the wave of secondhand opinions. People who only liked Nathan for his image were eager to believe him. People who respected me didn't ask for details. They already understood. Victoria sent a text 2 days after the breakup. "I hope the drama didn't spoil the gala for you. You're always welcome here, with or without a +1. P.S. Richard Peaton wants to meet about his grandmother's Victorian. Interested?" I stared at that message for a long moment, marveling at how life keeps opening the doors that ego tries to close. Work became my refuge. Long days at the carriage house, lime wash on my hands, the smell of sawdust and history filling my lungs. The more I rebuilt, the more I felt myself settling back into the person I'd been before Nathan's commentary started to feel like truth. A week later, I overheard 2 designers, mutual acquaintances, talking about Nathan's latest project at a cafe. One of them lowered her voice. "He's been pitching himself aggressively to new clients, but he's lost 2 this month. Something about over-promising." The other sighed. "It's a shame. He's talented when he isn't trying so hard to be whatever he thinks success looks like." I didn't feel satisfied, just tired. Around that time, I ran into Nathan again. It happened at a coffee shop near the historic district, one I frequented between site visits. He was with a man dressed in expensive clothing and louder confidence, the kind of person who treated luxury brands like a personality trait. Nathan saw me first. His face flickered, panic mixed with practiced charm. He straightened, smoothing his collar. "Sarah," he said brightly, too brightly. "Wow. Hey." I nodded. "Hi, Nathan." "This is Brandon," he said, hand hovering near the man's shoulder, like he wasn't sure if introducing him would seem like bragging or proof of recovery. "He's in finance." Brandon extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. Nathan says you do construction work." I smiled politely. "Restoration, historic properties." "Oh," he said, eyes glazing over. "Cool. Like house flipping?" Nathan jumped in before I could respond, his voice pitched higher than usual. "It's more specialized than that. She works on important properties. Ashford estate level stuff." I almost laughed. Nathan had learned the vocabulary of respect only after losing access to me. Brandon shrugged. Sounds lucrative. People with old houses have deep wallets, right? I suppose, I said, but that's not why I do it. Brandon clearly wasn't listening anymore. Nathan looked at me as if waiting for a signal of something. Jealousy, regret, validation. I gave him nothing. Well, I said, I should get going. I've got a site meeting. Of course, he said quickly. Good seeing you. His voice cracked on the last word. I left the cafe with the heaviness in my chest, not from seeing him, but from seeing the smallness he'd shrunk into. The version of Nathan who had once charmed me was gone, swallowed by the version he kept performing for strangers. But life doesn't revolve around X's and echoes. Mine certainly didn't. Work poured in. 3 major contracts in the span of a month. The Victorian mansion was massive, the downtown church restoration was complex, and the third project came from a preservation foundation that had quietly followed my work for years. More money than I'd ever made, more recognition than Nathan ever imagined, more meaning than any gala could offer. And then something shifted. Victoria invited me to a small dinner, just a handful of people connected to the Historical Society. I almost didn't go, but curiosity nudged me there. It was intimate, warm, the opposite of the gala's polished extravagance. Halfway through the evening, an older architect named Helen approached me. She had the posture of someone who'd never bent for nonsense in her life. I heard what happened at the gala, she said, sipping her wine. Quite the spectacle. I'm sorry if it caused trouble. She waved that off. Oh, don't apologize. It was enlightening and hilarious. Poor boy had no idea who you were. She leaned closer conspiratorially. We all watched the moment his brain cracked. I nearly choked on my drink. Don't worry, she added. We don't judge you for the man you date. We judge you for the work you do, and that's exceptional. Her words warmed something inside me, something that hadn't felt warm in a long time. Helen's niece arrived late. A man named Soren Hale, tall, dark-haired, the kind of quietly confident that doesn't need to introduce itself. He was a landscape architect. One look at his hands told me he actually worked with the earth, not just drew it. We've met, he said with a smile as he shook my hand. 2 years ago. You were restoring the Whitmore estate. I did the gardens. I blinked. I'm sorry, I don't remember. That's all right. I looked you up afterward, he admitted. Your work stuck with me. Something in my chest tightened. Pleasant, unexpected. Soren asked thoughtful questions. He listened, really listened, without waiting for his turn to talk. When he mentioned Victorian garden layouts and I countered with the original carriage house blueprints, his eyes lit up. We talked until dessert, until the room around us blurred, until Victoria shot me a pleased, knowing smile from across the table, like she had engineered the entire moment. Maybe she had. When the dinner ended, Soren walked me to my car. I'd like to see more of your work, he said, and maybe see you again too. For the first time in months, I felt something gentle flicker inside me. A beginning rather than an ending. I gave him my number. On the drive home, Penny greeted me at the door as though I'd been gone for days, her whole body wagging, grounding me back into the quiet calm of my own life. In the silence of my living room, I realized something simple. Nathan had measured worth by who applauded you. Soren measured worth by who you were when no one was watching. And I was finally someone who could tell the difference. Soren texted me the next morning. Coffee sometime this week? I'd like to hear more about your Victorian project. It was simple, unforced, no performance wrapped around it. I stared at the message longer than I meant to, surprised by how warm it made me feel. I said yes. We met at a quiet cafe, tucked between 2 antique shops. He arrived in work boots and a worn jacket that still carried the scent of soil and cedar. When he sat across from me, the whole room seemed to relax around him. How's the Ashford project? He asked. Most people asked so they could brag about knowing someone connected to old money. Soren asked like he genuinely cared about the craft. I told him about the final stage of the carriage house restoration, the custom milled timber we were using, the challenge of stabilizing century-old foundations without disturbing the historic footprint. He listened, his eyes bright with fascination, sometimes interjecting with questions so specific I knew he understood the stakes of every decision. Then he told me about the garden he was restoring at the Whitmore property. He pulled out a small sketchbook, smudged with charcoal and dirt, and showed me pencil drawings of the layout, annotations about native species, notes in the margins about drainage and light. It was beautiful work, thoughtful, rooted in respect for the past. You don't meet many people who care about preservation the way you do, he said quietly. I could say the same about you. He smiled, warm, grounded, without a hint of ego. It softened something inside me I hadn't realized was still tense. We ended up talking for hours, not about status, not about who we knew, but about the kinds of things that never make their way into polished introductions, the first project we screwed up, the mentors who changed the course of our lives, the buildings that left fingerprints on our hearts. When we finally stood to leave, he hesitated. Dinner next time? He asked. Dinner sounds perfect. Over the next few weeks, my life fell into a rhythm that felt startlingly natural. Work during the day, dinner with Soren once or twice a week, Penny curling against my leg in the evenings as I sifted through blueprints. The Victorian Mansion project launched in earnest, and the Preservation Foundation pushed forward with a museum renovation contract I'd been hoping for. Money poured in, more than I'd imagined a few years ago. Reputation, too, quiet, steady, built on the bones of real work. Not the kind of reputation Nathan chased, the kind that grows because you show up, do your job, and do it well. Nathan existed only as the occasional whisper in the design community. Someone mentioned he was rebranding his business. Someone else said he'd lost a big client after overpromising again. A mutual acquaintance told Kara that Nathan kept insisting the gala had ruined months of networking, as though humiliation, not behavior, had cost him doors. Eventually, I heard he'd broken things off with Brandon. Then he'd tried dating someone else in his social circle. Then someone else. And someone else. But image-obsessed people tend to collide with each other until the reflection shatters. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity either. Just distance. A clean line drawn between who I was then and who I had become. About 3 months after the gala, Victoria invited me back to the estate, this time for a small gathering of preservation board members. The carriage house restoration was complete, and she wanted to unveil it before the official press announcement. The evening air was soft, touched with the scent of newly planted herbs. Lanterns glowed along the walkway. The restored timber beams caught the warm light in a way that made them look alive again. Soren was there. He stood near a cluster of garden beds, running his fingers lightly along the leaves of a lavender plant, breathing it in like someone greeting an old friend. You did this? I asked. He shook his head. Just helped choose the layout. The plants belong to the land as much as to me. We walked together, our steps slow, unhurried. The foundation board members admired the building. Victoria bragged about my work to anyone with ears, and conversations drifted around us like gentle weather. At some point, Soren looked at me, really looked. You seem lighter than the first time I saw you, he said. I am, I admitted. I didn't realize how heavy things had been until they weren't. He nodded as though he understood something unspoken. Buildings do that too, you know. They take on weight from the people who don't respect them. And then someone comes along who sees them clearly, and the whole structure breathes again. I felt my chest expand with something warm and steady. Are you comparing me to a house? A historic one, he said, smiling. Worth preserving. We stood in silence for a moment, the garden humming softly around us, the carriage house glowing in its restored glory. Penny trotted happily at my side, tail wagging, as though she sensed the shift inside me. Soren reached for my hand, not with urgency, not with claim, but with gentle certainty. I let him take it. For once, the world didn't feel like something I had to fix or hold together. It simply felt right. A future built not on appearances, but on truth. Not on performance, but on substance. Not on what someone wanted me to be, but on who I already was. And as we walked through the freshly restored garden, fireflies flickering around us, I realized something simple and quiet. The gala had been the worst night of my relationship.